The church is starkly divided in her members. Social media has been used as a tool to breed division. How can we all come together and heal this division and make the Catholic YouTube platform more edifying? And today I have a very special guest, Catholic Answers apologist and author, and he has his own YouTube channel, Council of Trent, and podcast, Council of Trent. Trent, thank you so much for coming on during this Easter octave. It's very, very wonderful that you could come on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I saw some of your episodes, and I thought you had some really good insights into there's just this weird and unhelpful discord, anger, lack of charity, or just even things within Catholic YouTube that's just it's been difficult to see. And I would very much like the landscape to change while still retaining the core elements of explaining the faith, defending the faith. But I appreciated that I wasn't the only one who was noticing this stuff.
Yeah, there might be three of us, but my question for you is, so you've been an apologist, a pro-life activist.
Yeah.
You've debated people, Muslims, atheists, Protestant Christians. And I would venture to guess, maybe you've seen it all, maybe you haven't, but you did put out a video when, I think maybe last week or two, regarding some people attacking your family and your wife and your marriage. And I'm just wondering, why do you think it's come to this, where your personal life, your wife, is getting attacked on the level it's getting attacked? How's it come to this? What's going on? What are you noticing?
Yeah, I've noticed that there are some people in online communities, especially certain corners of the online Catholic and Orthodox world, that feel like it's okay to criticize people's family or their family situations. And they're more concerned maybe with owning people than with displaying charity, or they think they don't have an obligation to be charitable. Another thing I've seen is this equivocation between critique and attack. So in one of my previous episodes, I was critiquing people who have an overly harsh view towards women, towards husbands loving and publicly praising their wives. And so I offered critiques of other people, including some Catholics, who kind of hold these views that I think are somewhat disordered, and they're kind of silly views. And so I offered a critique of that. And I have critiqued many people. I've critiqued, Gavin Ortland. Gavin and I have a lot of back and forth. Or I'll critique Joe Schmidt at Majesty of Reason. And so I'll say, okay, here's why I believe you're wrong, or this is really unhelpful, or this is just weird. And then they'll come back and say, well, here's why I'm wrong. And that's completely fair. But I've noticed with these individuals, any critique, that any form of criticism is labeled attack. It's attack. And so therefore that justifies any attack in reply. And so they poured forth these calumnies about my wife. And basically my episode, by the way, I was talking about, how men should treat their wives, things like that. In that actual episode, I never even mentioned my own marriage. I didn't use that as a reference point. So they were engaging in an ad hominem to say, well, you have a bad marriage, which isn't true. So therefore you're wrong. Like, okay, that's one, it's not true. Two, even if it were true, which it's not, that's an ad hominem. That doesn't reflect my argument, because my script that I gave, it had nothing to do with my own marriage. I'm talking about basic principles of human decency. But these people are just not decent. They're incredibly indecent. In the past, when I have just merely shown clips of these individuals saying horrible, unchristian things, that is labeled an attack or a lie, when it's not a lie. Well, you took that out of context. How so? Well, here, he said we should love people in this other video. Okay, just because somebody says something good in one video, that doesn't counterbalance a horrible thing they say in another video or another episode. And so I think this particular group, what I found disheartening is the inability to handle criticism. So if I'm critiquing you, just make a reply showing why I am wrong. But they're not able to do that. So instead, what they do is they go on attack, and they use belligerent bullying tactics, flooding comment sections, verbal abuse, all kinds of calumny, in order to try to silence people. And what they do is they try to just bully and intimidate people into silence. And I will let them know that will not and will never work for me. I am going to speak the truth to whoever's going to hear that. And in my reply, I made it very clear to people who are saying these things, I'm mostly sad about the state of their souls. Many of them engaged in grave sins. I really hope they will repent. I would hate to see them forsake their salvation just because they're mad at me. You're gonna choose being mad at Trent Horn over heaven. Nothing about Trent Horn is worth more than heaven. I'm gonna have to let people know that.
Right. What do you think is the root of this equivocation between critique, criticism, and polemical attacks? I mean, I, you know, I think you and I, amongst other people, we know the difference or the fine line, and we can actually take it, like you said in your video. If you want to attack me, but don't bring my family and bring my wife in this.
Right.
So, what do you think is the basis for all this? What are people just so insecure and they're needing to find some sort of sensationalism? And so it's so easy to just go on a computer or phone screen and just type in all this vile, crass, polemical stuff.
Right.
And it makes them feel better. Like it raises their ego while lowering yours, even though you're I mean, what's that root? What do you think?
I think it is really rooted in a deep sense of insecurity and posturing, and a lack of confidence, frankly. It's like, for example, in the world of martial arts, I'll notice that the people who are the most macho and bravado and try to puff out their chests and act like they're a tough guy and they talk trash about everybody else, they're posturing. They're not as confident in their fighting abilities as other people. But the people I know, like at least in the martial arts world that I'm in, the people like the highest black belts I know, they're absolutely chill individuals because they know they can take anybody in the room and they don't have to be worried about that. They're just completely chill about everything. They don't have to posture. So I've noticed online that there's I find the individuals who are the most profane, the most abusive, the most aggressive, they have to rely on that to either try to intimidate opponents or prevent anyone from having a fair dialogue because they're just not able to engage in just a decent exchange of ideas and friendly critique that anyone could watch and learn from. So like the people I know across the Catholic world who are the most competent debaters and explicators of ideas, Catholic or Protestant, or whatever it may be. So people like the Catholic philosopher Ed Feser, the Protestant philosopher William Lane Craig, Gavin Ortlund would be another example of this. These are people who can withstand criticism and make a reply back without getting defensive and just saying, this person said this, here's where I would say, here's where they're wrong. And here's how I would just reply to that. And they just don't take it personally. And it'd be the same with many other people that I know. So I do find it interesting. It's like, look, when you defend an argument in public, people will say you're wrong. That comes with the territory. But I've noticed, it's a kind of just like insecurity where just pointing out someone is wrong or inconsistent or lacks evidence, it's labeled attack. And I think a lot of them view it in this tribalist mindset of here's my team, here's my people, and there's the other team, there's the bad guys. And it's like, no, all of us are on kind of a spectrum of agreement and disagreement, and we're just trying to follow the evidence where it leads.
Yeah, I mentioned at the beginning, like the stark division in the Catholic Church within her members, online, social media, but obviously it runs rampant in the other Christian circles like Protestants and Orthodox. And since I've been a YouTube content creator, I can't help but notice certain areas or circles of people where I didn't expect any of this to happen or to, not even to be aware of it. Because before I started my YouTube channel, I was just one of those peons who would comment on your channel. Like, you know what I mean? And then now I'm on the other end of it and I'm seeing just such hatred. And it's like this ego puffing or this, this egotistical machoism that I'm seeing with all these people. And it's content creators and it's people who watch their stuff. And like you said, it's like we're not on a team. People are taking it personal. People are infatuated with debates. Like,
here's one I've noticed that I have seen, and not even classic debates. I like debates, but something where it's just a brawl, where it's just when one person is louder and speaks more forcefully and will continually interrupt the other person and engage in what's called jamming, for example. They just judge it on those merits rather than just by just a clear and transparent exchange of arguments instead of an exchange of forceful personalities. I noticed, I saw one individual who posted something on X that was really interesting. They were replying to Redeemed Zoomer. It was a Catholic X account, has decent following to it. It's not a random account. It's not an anonymous account either. And what this individual said to Redeemed Zoomer, is a guy I like. I've had him on the show, and we've discussed our theological agreements and our differences. And we had a good discussion about our differences. And he basically called Redeemed Zoomer a heretic, was lambasting him. And someone wrote underneath, do you think that's ever effective with getting Protestants to change their mind? And what he wrote under that struck me. He said, I'm not here for non-Catholics or to change their minds. I'm just here to strengthen the brethren. So it's like, look at that. So you're not interested in the Great Commission. You're not interested in trying to share our faith with others, to dialogue and engage them. I find the people that are the people who are just most forceful blowhards or profane or derogatory, they are the ones I've noticed have the least public record of engaging people in really civil conversations. I think there's a few exceptions to that. There's some people that could be more civil, but also can have the gloves come off when they feel like it. But there's many others where I've never seen them. Like they'll it's right there. It's like, I don't care. I want to make Catholics feel good. I'm not interested in talking to non-Catholics. And it's funny, on the far left in the church, I see the same thing, where they're not interested in engaging people who are not Catholic. They just want to critique Catholics on the right. So it's, when I see these, especially when I see people say like, oh, that's such a so much feminine energy dialogue with non-Catholics, you should just tell them we're heretics. Okay, show me how it's done. Invite Gavin Ortland, invite one of these other Protestant channels that's actually there's smaller ones that are really up and coming with some smart people in them. Or Jordan Cooper, invite them on, and you show me how it's done. You show me how to do it without so-called feminine energy or weak sauce energy or whatever it may be. But I find they're just not interested in doing that, because they're not really interested in engaging others. It's kind of like if someone's a professional athlete, there's a guy on the couch saying, this is what you should be doing. Why should that athlete take advice from the guy on the couch? Why? It's easy to sit on the couch and tell the guy on the court what he should and shouldn't be doing. It's a lot different when you're actually on the court and you know how to play the game.
Yeah, I think people, and maybe I'll kind of turn this into a question, but I think people, they don't realize what they're doing. They don't have an end in their channel or watching or viewing. Why am I doing this? Why am I commenting? Why do I keep going on YouTube every day and making these comments or producing these videos? What is the point? Isn't strictly for monetization? Is it strictly to dunk on other people? Or is your primary goal to save souls? And that goes back to your point where good luck trying to save Protestants or Eastern Orthodox or non-Catholic souls by just engaging in inordinate and polemical debates, or just trying to prove them wrong and being macho and masculine. So I do want to ask you this, because I see the debate stuff going on everywhere.
Yeah.
And I've seen you debate very well, charitably, ecumenically, while not compromising the truth. So are you noticing people on social media platforms just being inordinately obsessed with not even formal moderated debates, but just, hey, come debate me, let's, blah, 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 in all Christian circles?
Yes, I've seen where you offer a criticism of someone, and then instead of them replying to your criticism, it's, let's debate this. And I think what they mean by debate is to have a one-on-one conversation where the person who is just most forceful and rhetorical will appear to come out on top and engage that. Or even if they don't come out on top, they'll provide red meat for their followers and supporters. And that's all they're interested in. And here, on a few once in a blue moon, I will agree with the Reformed apologist James White, someone who crops up in Catholic apologetic circles and discussions. That White has critiqued some people, and they've said, just come debate me in this open thread. And White says, no, I'm not going to engage in a theological food fight.
Right.
Let's have rounds and structure and at least some moderation, so that we can actually engage one another and people can see the ideas that are present. The point of debate is for ideas to be tested. But I think many people treat it as, oh, this guy owned that guy with this quick barb or jab or insult or gotcha question. And they're just looking for that instead of testing the ideas as a whole. So I don't like this this kind of brawling, if you will. I like, what I do like though, is if I can have conversations with people who don't have that mindset. So someone who's somewhat aggressive, I might do a formal debate with them with structure to keep them in check. But people who have goodwill, like I guess like among Protestants, Gavin Ortland or Redeem Zoomer, Jordan Cooper, for example. And then among non-theists, I mean, I could sit down. I've been talking to Joe Schmidt at Majesty of Reason. I said, I'd love to have you down to the studio. He and I could, or Alex O'Connor. Alex and I could easily just sit and have an actual conversation with each other where we're trying to get at the truth together. But I think many other people treat this as, oh, this is an opportunity for me to defeat that person, to own them. So they treat it tribally in that sense, instead of just a more honorable discussion about ideas and seeking the truth together.
Yeah, it almost seems like a pastime activity just to kind of beat people up and not really search for the truth or try to ecumenically save souls. But I wanted to ask you this.
Yeah.
Have you felt in the last 6 years, well, I know you've been doing apologetics for 20 years, but in the last 6 years on YouTube, have you ever been inclined or tempted to kind of clap back or to, I don't know, engage in some of these polemical tendencies and things like that? And how have you dealt with that to help us other YouTube content creators?
I feel bad afterwards. I think honestly, having a bright line, there's a book actually, it's called Bright Line Eating. It's a book that deals with like diet and weight loss and exercise, and just most diets just don't work for people because they end up being abused. But Bright Line deals with just setting very firm and hard boundaries of what you will and won't eat, because you just can't really trust yourself. And so I think many of us need a bright line with social media. So what helped me the most to not fall into these behaviors is quitting social media. So for example, like on X, I only have one public post there. It just says, it's a link to my episode where I said why I quit social media. Now, every now and then I will reply to someone by saying like, praise be to God that you came into the church, or here's a book. Here's a free copy of my book, if that will help you. But I'm not going to, the temptation for me to quote tweet someone and dunk on them and say, this is stupid, and get in an argument with people, it's really removed, because I'm like, okay, if I do that, then I've broken this public line I gave to people that I'm not going to do this anymore. And that's going to be embarrassing. So it's like, I'm not going to. So what stinks is now, like, people will trash me online and I can't really say anything because I don't want to be sucked into that world. So I just have to like water off a duck's back, take that. And if it is big enough and important enough, and in a few weeks, there's a few criticisms people have made to me online, I will incorporate into future episodes. So like when people were attacking my wife on social media, at first I just let it go. It's like, you know what, I'm not going to dignify this, but it got big enough that okay, now this warrants a reply to me on my channel where I can be thought out. And instead of just a short X post, I can have a full and complete argument to present, or a full and complete position to offer. So I think that can be helpful for us with social media. Yeah, I don't know. I get really concerned about the interactions there. I think they tend to be sort of a net negative.
Yeah. I do want to bring this up, and I don't want to reduce it or limit it to Gen Z, because I have a lot of Gen Z friends and supporters and subscribers, all that stuff. But I have noticed the trend, and I just want your thoughts. If you notice this trend and maybe what we can do about it, and it's not to single anyone out, but I have noticed a lot of Gen Z wannabe theologians. All they're doing, and it's in the comments, it's content creators, they're just wanting to criticize, attack, and prove wrong people like you and I, or anyone else in the YouTube world. And they're literally, that's all they're doing. That's their end. So it's not a means, it's an end in of itself. And it's so inordinate. And I'm just like, who do you guys think you are? Because to me, people like that, the whole wannabe theologians, how many souls have you saved? I'm not saying I have or you have, but you know what I mean? Like, how many souls are you converting by just this hubris and the theological jamming down the throat? I don't get it.
And I think it can be done in a charitable way. But I think what often ends up happening in these situations, a person wants to lord their knowledge over others, or in many of these cases, abundant knowledge of a specific limited thing that they have become preoccupied with, so that they can lord that over other people. I think it's difficult to see people act like that, because look, it's always easier to tear down than to build up. Okay, so what are you like when you are putting out posts and things like that on the internet, how is this drawing people to Christ? Or are you just concerned about trying to one up everybody else, or the things that you're critiquing? Is it really that big of a deal, or is it just, like kind of a minor point? But yeah, I would just encourage them to use those energies, create something new that is your own, create something positive to draw others, into the faith. And know if you do that, people will offer criticism of you. Like, there's nothing wrong with criticism, but it has to have the right attitude and really be coming from the right place.
Yeah, constructive and
Yeah.
not, lacking charity and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So St. Thomas Aquinas, he has a lot to say about backbiting and revilement. And, for people like you and I know I'm much lower level, but whatever. When we're putting out content and other Catholic apologists are putting out content and they're engaging in deliberate revilements, reviling against other people, when does it become our moral obligation? You, I, or even all the viewers and subscribers, when do they become complicit or implicated in the guilt of the person that's doing these things? Do you know what I mean? Like, how should viewers, subscribers, and clickers, whatever you want to call them, what should they do about these certain people?
It's a good question. I think the level of responsibility that one would have in these cases, like let's just say watching a channel where a person is very uncharitable, I think any sinful cooperation there is going to be fairly minimal because, one viewer adds the metric just a little bit. It's not like a ton. I think you would have much more responsibility if you were, for example, financially supporting a Catholic commenter who engaged in profane, uncharitable, or in some cases blasphemous behavior, and you're financially supporting that person, then I think that is really something you should take stock of. But I think that the responsibility, I think at the bare minimum would be that we should not amplify those sinful voices more than necessary. So if you come across a Catholic creator who is profane, who is promoting teachings that are contrary to the church, and by the church, of course, I mean what the church teaches, the living magisterium, not someone who has decreed themselves the magisterium and saying this is what Catholics actually believe. No, what the bishops in union with the Pope teach in contradiction to that. That I would say at the bare minimum, you shouldn't amplify that person without good reason. So just reposting them because you think they're funny. No, don't give them attention. In some cases, I have seen some of these creators and they've said things that I believe are really spiritually harmful. And so I will include them in an episode and then offer critical commentary of that. And so I think that can be helpful there, but I wouldn't just amplify them just to increase their reach without critical commentary, constructive and charitable critical commentary. And then, I would say though, if you know that of a creator, you might just want to avoid their material unless you have good reason. So like I got to watch everything that's out there. It just comes with my job. And there's low lives and degenerates across all theologies and atheologies and like non-religious people. I got to watch it all because I got to comment on a lot of different stuff. But for many other people, if it's garbage out there, if you watch it, especially if you subscribe, it's like, well, you're supporting them. You don't have to support garbage. You can just, there's a million other positive things you could be doing with your life than listening to theological garbage. And you should really take seriously, focusing your attentions on that rather than the other stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And like you, I'm inundated with this stuff because this is a part of our career, and, we got to watch what's going on for various reasons. So like if I were to go on one of these channels that we're alluding to, it's not necessarily that I'm supporting and or getting pleasure from this. It's kind of like I'm collecting data. I know that sounds kind of bad, but it's like I'm collecting data.
I agree.
I'm observing, right? What is going
like
on?
my library, half my library are heretical books. Not because I support heresy, but I have to know the heresies in order to refute them. So it's the same with things that are out there. You know what, by the way, it's funny. I know some people will say, ugh, I can't stand this tone policing. That they'll make this idea that you're tone policing or you're henpecking other people by saying they shouldn't be profane and abusive. just saying, not even even some profanity. And I did an episode on, should saints swear, should commenters be out swearing, where even some profanity in an isolated case can be merited in the situation. I'm talking about profanities lobbed at someone to really abuse them and belittle that person and attack them in that way. I mean, Jesus said, whoever calls his brother Raka, fool, will be guilty of the fires of Gehenna. No one takes that. They don't want to take that seriously. But Jesus makes that very clear there. So what's funny to me is people will accuse me of tone policing. I can't believe you're telling people what they can and can't say. To which I would respond, so are you telling me what I can and can't say?
Yeah.
You are literally doing the same thing. Either just be a man, relax, and let people have their say, or police everybody. But don't act like that you're exempt from legitimate criticism.
Right. And what I've also noticed, and you could probably speak to this too, is a lot of these men, right, that are really pushing this masculinity, especially within the faith, right, and kind of downplaying the femininity.
The femininity, it's like sea anemone.
Yeah.
Those fenemones at the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, right. Femininity, correct.
Yeah. And really what I think is it's a projection of really a lack of true masculinity. And they're trying to make up for it by attacking and bringing other men down and saying that you're being feminine by, your tone policing and your tolerance and, your charity and your ecumenism and all this stuff. I don't know how you feel about that, but the church is a mother, and the maternal dimension precedes the petrine. So when it comes to the feminine, hey, we are the bride.
And God himself is described as like a nursing mother who will care for his children under his wing. Jesus even says, I long to gather you together like a mother hen gathers her young. So this idea, it starts to get into a weird idea of like masculine good, feminine bad, which is like a Gnostic or ancient heresy. We just say, they're both good. They're just different and have their proper roles for individuals. Yeah, but this idea of like pushing a very particular and narrow idea of masculinity, that I would say, who are the most masculine role models in our faith? When I think of like Venerable Fulton Sheen, St. Francis de Sales, Pope St. John Paul II, they would be aghast at the things I hear some of these creators in the name of so-called masculinity saying and doing and treating other people. They'd be absolutely aghast. And I don't know anyone who would say that Pope St. John Paul II was not masculine, Venerable Fulton Sheen. And those are among clergy. But then you can also just pick examples of people just in general, even our own personal lives. Like, frankly, the people that I know in my life who are the most masculine don't talk about masculinity a lot.
Right.
I think if you have to constantly talk about how you're masculine, it just seems kind of weird to me. Like it's like people who, it's like, it's like Andrew Tate the other day he did some X post and he said something like, the whole world is talking about how cool and awesome I am. Like, people who are cool and awesome don't say out loud they're cool and awesome.
Yeah.
That's like literally. I have a hard time even believing that Tate writes these posts, because they really sound like something a 12-year-old would come up with.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the age he's psychologically stuck at.
Yeah. It's just like, the guy that tries too hard and who's desperate at trying to get the woman, I'm a man and I'm this and I'm that. But it was funny you mentioned like, if you're the best, you don't need to say it to people. Like,
Absolutely
I remember, again, I don't get into sports on these channels, but whatever. LeBron James said he was the GOAT back when he beat the Warriors in Game 7 and all that.
Yeah.
And Michael Jordan's like, I've never, ever said I'm the GOAT. And we all know he's the GOAT because he doesn't have to say he's the GOAT.
Your reputation precedes you, and it should be a good reputation. Now, I will say it's interesting, though. I think the problem is, though, that a lot of them do have fair points of criticism. Like, so there are people on the left in the church who say that I am uncharitable because I'll speak blunt truths. Like, I'll say transgender identity is a mental disorder. Sodomy is a perverted act. Abortion is murder. So there's not like you're either these alpha bros who are really profane and abusive, or this like smarmy, on the left in the church that's unwilling to say anything. It's not those two extremes. Like, you can be assertive. Like, I remember in my debate with Destiny and Jasmine on prostitution and all that stuff. I don't know if you have to bleep that so your channel doesn't get dinged or whatever, but on the adult explicit behaviors, like I said that I said he was insane right to his face. You can be assertive with people, but you can do that without having to be aggressive, and certainly without having to be abusive.
Well, and it helps that you're face to face with him. There's a context that has been established, a rapport that's been established.
Yeah.
It was, you know what I mean? And that goes back to righteous indignation with, everyone wants to say, well, yeah, Christ flipped over tables. So that gives them the right to just go online and just blast people and just label it as righteous indignation. And it's like, well, I don't think you would go into the church and flip pews over and say, I'm doing that because Jesus did that, just because they're selling rosaries in the.
And you know what's interesting there, though? I mean, he attacked things. I mean, it's a little debated about whether he attacked people. He drove them out. But Jesus didn't go up and just sock people in the face. Jesus didn't go up to them and say, your mother's a whore. Like, Jesus, at best, he attacked the evil actual objects, the tables, the money lending apparatuses. Yeah. And he wanted these people just to leave where he was. Like, he just forcibly relocated them. But people take from that is, oh, Jesus did something that was aggressive, therefore I can do anything that's aggressive to people who are wrong. And that is just, you've isolated Jesus to one particular moment in his ministry against the major teachings that Jesus constantly gives. And not even that, like the people who say that you can be profane and abusive to other Christians and cruel or malicious, I just really wonder if they ever have read the Bible.
Right.
I really, really do want, and I really, and a lot of times I'll listen to a lot of these episodes and I rarely hear them quote scripture, except for passages like, Jesus flipping over the tables. Like, because when, like in my episode on swearing, like I said, look, it's just obvious what Paul says in Ephesians, for example, what he says in Colossians over and over. St. Paul, dealing with awful heresies, says you ought not be quarrelsome. You ought to speak the truth in love. You ought to season your words like salts. You may know what to say to everyone. And I'm like, are you just going to just pretend that this doesn't exist in scripture?
Right. Yeah, they like to take those isolated verses out of context to justify what they're doing, when I think the most important verse when it comes to stuff like this is be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves.
Yes,
that's
Matthew 10:16.
That is prudence personified.
Yeah,
that's what he's talking about. Just because it's true doesn't mean you have to say it. Just because it's true doesn't mean you have to do it. You have to think about the context. Is this prudent? How is this going to affect my audience? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people don't think with prudence these days. I'm sorry, they just don't.
Father Gregory Pine has a great book on that, by the way, on the virtue of prudence. So I'd highly recommend that for your listeners.
Oh yeah, do you get a kickback for that or what?
No, it was just right. It was just on the I noticed it was on my coffee table actually earlier this morning. But what's funny is I'm thinking about doing another episode on how to not be a weird religious person. And basically it just comes down to cultivating very specific virtues. And I would put those as like prudence would definitely be one of them. Empathy would just be another. Of you don't want to go overboard, but if you can understand, like, oh, this other person feels X, probably that'll go a long way in helping you to relate to that person and not come off as a weirdo.
Right. And just, I mean, St. Paul, we put on the mind of Christ. I mean, literally, that's what we should be doing, and looking at people with the mind of Christ.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
How did Christ look at people? He didn't look at them as objects. He didn't lack empathy, right? He went to the marginalized, the poor, all that stuff. You know all that, but
of course.
Yeah. So I want to say thanks. I think you're one of the most professional and charitable and ecumenical YouTubers out there. I think you really give us a lot to work with and to like reflect and mimic. And I'm really happy for you and your success, especially lately. I've noticed in the last year. I'm not saying you weren't successful before then.
We've seen a tremendous growth in the channel in the past year. We're averaging now about 2 million views a month.
So here's the thing, right? And again, I'm not trying to undermine your channel when you started, okay? But in the last year...
aesthetically, it was garbage.
Yeah.
We were still trying to figure everything out.
Not even aesthetically. And hold on just a second. So In the last year, I've never seen any YouTube channel, because your content's always been good. We all know that. But just when it comes to how long a video is, how much B-roll, the aesthetics of your studio, just everything is perfect.
Well,
It's not too long. It's not too short.
Is well, that's the thing. I've been on YouTube since really we started in 2020, but I had the podcast since 2018. So it's about 5 years. We've done 1,000 episodes, over 1,000. It's really trial and error. Anyone who wants to get out there and share their faith in this venue, it's just a lot of trial and error. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's just not okay to refuse to learn from them. And so I've learned, like, hey, actually scripting things is helpful. Okay, I'm going to script everything. And when I script it, I should have this in mind. And just you see what works and what's helpful for people. And I'm just really excited. Like, my advice to people who are just like having not a great attitude online, just really assume the best of the other person and go after the argument, all while assuming the best of the other person. At least publicly operate with that assumption. And if you do that, people will have a lot of respect for what you put forward. But especially, it's like, look, instead of focusing on attacking and being cruel or malicious, just become like a ninja warrior with the argument. So you can say, all right, everybody, here are the 5 things that were wrong with this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here's 3 reasons that my position is correct. And here you go. All right, you guys have a nice day. Be low key about it and just focus on the argument and the evidence, and just maintain a prayerful attitude where the point is to not own people or glorify yourself. It's just to glorify God in your work, to make the faith more intelligible, to lead more souls to Christ and salvation in him.
Yeah, amen. Oh, I agree. I do have to bring this up. I
Sure.
want your advice.
Yeah.
So Pope Francis just passed, God rest his soul, but
Yeah.
it doesn't really have to do with Pope Francis. It just has to do with the papacy in general, and how we as laymen and apologists and YouTubers and all that stuff, Canon 212, whatever.
Yeah. Approaching your pastors, all that.
Yeah. How should we, or how shouldn't we go about in expressing our disagreement, or I hate to use the word, the trite word that's been just, but did I say confusing?
Maybe, yeah. Or
ambiguous.
You said disagreement, confusing. I don't know if you wanted to go into dissent or.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, but ambiguous or whatever.
Ambiguous, ambiguous.
Yeah,
Concerns,
all those stigmatized words that the media just loves to, tout or whatever. But if we have a doubt, if we're challenged by something that comes out of the DDF or from the Pope, how should we prudently display that? Whether it's publicly, privately, all that stuff.
Well, I think that we have to have a stricter standard for what we publicly display versus privately. Like, you can for example, like, you can privately wrestle with doubts you might have about certain doctrines that are not dogmatic, for example. But it would be a scandalous sin for you to publicly do that in a way that makes people cast doubt on the faith, for example. So just because you're having a private struggle with the church doesn't mean you have to drag other people into your private struggle. So you should see, is there a justification here for making this more public, whether it's to help other people so that they don't go down a bad road, or maybe it will create traction and the person who's causing confusion will, add clarity to where they've caused, where they've created confusion. I think especially with bishops, or, I've sparingly been critical. I was sparingly critical of Pope Francis, but also generally supportive of him. I just think that when you offer a public criticism, do it in a way where you would not be ashamed to offer that criticism face to face that individual if you were sitting down with him.
Beautiful.
You would be just as comfortable saying it right to their face, and their grandmother was there listening. To say, like, hey, I really appreciate all this and that, but this caused a lot of confusion, and that's very difficult. And I feel like it would be appropriate to have clarity on this matter. Things like that. But I think people know deep down when it's okay and when it isn't, because I think most people who engage in the harshest criticisms, they hide behind an anonymous account. And that's why I think most people should just get rid of their anonymous accounts. Either put your face and your name behind your words, or keep your words to yourself so that you can be held accountable for the things you say.
Right, right. I mean, just discern. I don't think people are actually thinking critically or discerning or praying about it. They're just impetuously going
Nope.
online.
And
Wanting
Jesus
to,
says, man will be held account, be justified by their words. They will be held account for every idle thing they say. And I would add to that, and post.
yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think I have another appointment here very shortly, but if you want to.
three quick questions. They're like yes or no.
Sure thing. Let's do it.
They're fun questions.
Let's do it.
I got to end with fun questions. So
all right, let's do it.
Some either or questions.
Okay.
St. Thomas Aquinas or St. Augustine?
I have to go with St. Thomas Aquinas. He really is the GOAT.
Oh, he didn't have to say he was the GOAT, right?
He did
just
not
let
say
the
that he
talk
is.
for him.
Hey, not a knock on Augustine. He's great, but you know, Aquinas has a special pride of place. I think even Pope Leo XIII recognized that. But go ahead.
Oh yeah. All right. Redeem Zoomer or Gavin Ortland?
You can't make me pick that one. You can't make me pick. They're both fun. Gavin's my favorite apologist, and Redeem Zoomer is my favorite reconquistador.
So I've had Richard on like 2 or 3 times. We're not best friends, but you know. Yeah. Anyways, Joe Heschmeyer or Tim Staples?
Oh, that is a tough one there. Tim was my boss for a while, so I do appreciate that. But Joe is being a fellow millennial trying to navigate this crazy online world. He and I often do a lot of commiserating. His channel, Shameless Popery, is great. So Joe and I, a lot of commiserating of what exactly did this Gen Z or Gen Alpha slang mean? So I think he and I have a lot in common there. And so we commiserate a lot.
Yeah. And then you got to ask me one question. It can be anything, and then we'll go. Anything.
Oh, if you could vacation anywhere on earth, where would you go?
Oh gosh. Dallas, Texas? No.
You'll come visit me.
Yeah,
that's
man.
Fun.
Yeah, we'll do a week series on how to be better YouTubers and have better etiquette.
Or you can come with me. I think if I had to answer that, I mean, I think I love Switzerland. I was there many years ago, and it's like a storybook. The other one, though, I've never been to, and I would love to go to, is Patagonia in like South America. You look at pictures of Patagonia, it like doesn't even look real. So I'll put that on.
I will do that.
Do it.
I would go to Fatima. That's because
Oh,
my wife and I were married on the feast day of Our Lady of Fatima, and all our kids are named after the kids. So, yep. Trent Horn, amazing. I'm just so blessed. I'm so blessed and honored to have you on here.
Yeah, and keep up all your good work. I really appreciate your commentary.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, have a wonderful day, Trent. Appreciate it.
Alrighty.
All right. Peace.